Thank you all so much for coming tonight. I have the pleasure of speaking with Aimee Jones, who has done a remarkable job on this exhibition. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
So, I'd love to start just by getting to know more about your journey in art and art making. What were some of your earliest influences?
So, starting as an artist, I was a frustrated advertising major in undergrad. So I didn't get to actually get an art degree to start off with. And later, I moved to Italy and Spain. I lived with an Italian ceramicist who made a lot of work about Virgin Mary and Jesus and stuff. And then like religious iconography. And then after that I went to Spain and was like very inspired by kind of like all these ceramic tiles. Again, like a lot of Catholic iconography, and just got into portraiture. So that was kind of like what I applied to grad school with. And then once COVID happened, it wasn't really so easy to kind of paint a person in front of me. So I was like trying to do like a traditional still life. Or I'm sorry, traditional portraiture. And yeah, so it's kind of like become these like covered bodies and lack of identity and then objectification and added with Florida iconography.
Another, you touched on it a little bit, but another influence that we talked about was still life.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interested to know, like, what is it about still life that interests you, and why do you think there's more to offer the viewer than just flowers?
Mm-hmm. So, just like as an art history reference, so still life was like, obviously it's a very traditional thing, right? It's just objects that are in front of you that you observe and paint. But for a long time, that was always kind of man's dominion over nature. So it was kind of to show like that, you know, manifest destiny, or in the Bible that, you know, man like controls all of earth, and it's for man to basically, like fertile landscape is for man to basically like own, right? So, so still life is like kind of always rooted into that. And then, so why I like still life. So yeah, it was starting with portraiture, and then my work just kind of was taking the body as an object. So it was really like thinking about the body and cropping it. So I did a body of work right before this show where there was a mirror. So it was like a vanity mirror. It would be like in your bathroom. And I was kind of seeing how like when I was like reflecting on myself, like seeing my body cropped and like taking this like objectification of it. So later I started to incorporate the mirror and to incorporate the body into the still life. So like thinking of this like man's dominion over nature, women are associated with nature, and man is associated with culture, technology, innovation. So where like women are always kind of seen as something to like kind of control, right? So then it just kind of grew into like, first it was like these objects that, like fruits that looked like bodies, vegetables that looked like bodies. And then now it's kind of becoming vases, like objects that we collect every day. So porcelain, ceramics, and souvenirs that look like bodies. And it's weird that we collect that. And I think there's like kind of a subconscious man's dominion over something, right? Of like, why do we need to like own it? So that's my long story and why I like still life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, we've talked a little bit about how still life is becoming more in vogue these days.
It is, yeah. More, I think more contemporary artists are kind of looking at it. I think right now it's also going a little bit away from figuration into abstraction as well. But I think that still life has always kind of been this rooted theme in art. Like I don't know if we're ever going to get away from still life, because it's like the objects that are like whatever is in like the zeitgeist of like what that is. And then I think we also talked about Meninas as well, of like Meninas as being like this objects that kind of remind you of basically the ending of life. So there's like always fruits and lush, food, right? But then there's always, sometimes there's like dead animals that you'll see, or rotting fruits, like a lot of artists used to like to do that, or like a skull, which is like more on the nose, as this like reminder of like death, right? That there's like, that life is fleeting, and yeah, flowers and plants. I mean, like how many times do you get a bouquet of flowers and just fucking die after a week? Like, so, like, why did I spend all that money?
I thought it was really interesting when you were telling me about your appreciation for Gustave Courbet's L'Origine du Monde, or The Origin of the World. So for those that are maybe not familiar with that painting,
Yes.
Do you want to give us a little overview?
Yes, and that's also very important and to mention still life. So L'Origine du Monde, which is, this is also L'Origine de Vos. But it is a painting that you probably have all seen, but it is this woman basically from like the belly down into like maybe down to her thighs, and her legs are spread apart, and it's her vagina and pubic hair, and it's the origin of the world. And it was just like a shocking thing to see back then, right? Because first of all, it's extremely objectifying, right? It was I want to say it was a prostitute, but I might be wrong. I believe it was a prostitute.
That was very common.
Yeah, I believe it was a prostitute who was modeling for it. And so Courbet was like, oh, I'm going to kind of like do this play on that, like, you think this is objectifying and awful, but it's the origin of the world, right? Like, we all come from a vagina, let's be real, right? And that's all we got here, right? So the way that the composition is this body that's like split into like a half, and it's this like way, I just thought it looked so much like a still life. So I was like, oh, I've never seen like a body like really done like a still life. So I always like kind of allude back to it of this like symmetry in the work of like just like, I don't know, like a splitting in half, I guess. So yeah, I love that Courbet. And it's, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's in the Grand Budapest Hotel. No. Is it in Grand Budapest Hotel? It's in a Wes Anderson film. I know that they like have it in somebody's house. Actually, no, it's in Home Alone in the background. What? Yeah, in their living room.
That's not Wes Anderson.
Yeah. Sorry. You can probably cut that out in the room. Just fun fact. It was, yeah. So, it's a very lewd, seemingly lewd piece, but when you're thinking about it, it's like, isn't that like the most natural thing ever, right? Like,
they do go to Paris in Home Alone, so.
I just think it's there. I don't know this. Yeah, I'm not sure. Somebody fact check me.
I mean, how do you think that work influenced the way you paint the figure?
So I do think that, so initially it was painting other people, right? Like when I was a portrait painter, I was really inspired by Alice Neal, who was inspired by all the other people who wanted to just paint somebody in front of them, because I just feel like there's more like a realness of like I don't know, there's just like, as opposed to a photograph, painting somebody in front of you is just, the painting feels like it's more alive. I don't know, it just doesn't feel like as much of a moment captured, right? Like you can see like movement in a painting, right? And so it first started as that, and then of course COVID happened, things happened, and it turned into this like inward reflection. So the body becoming an object was just something I think I just kind of thought more about. I did women and gender studies classes as well, and I was kind of thinking about like in terms of like advertising, how we never see like the face. Like I even have students, and like the first thing they want to paint is like a hot naked woman without a head. And like, why does she have a head? It's just like, I don't know. They're like, I don't know. It's just because it's nice to look at. But like, why is it nice to look at? I don't know. Why are there so many headless women? So it becomes this like decorative object, and I just like to think of this cropping and think of this object kind of becoming confrontational and looking back at you. So I guess for me, Gustave Courbet's the vagina's looking back at you, isn't it? It's like it's a confrontational painting. It is, yeah. Yeah.
It's in Home Alone.
It is in Home Alone. Thank you.
So random.
It's really random. It's a kid movie. Thank you.
Well, you yourself are a big collector of decorative objects, porcelain, glass, things like that. Has that always been something in your personality?
It's honestly just kind of recent. I think that whenever, I think when I turned 30, all of a sudden I started getting interested in glass, vintage glass. It was like one of those weird things you're like, this is what I'm interested in now. And I started going to antique stores, as we've been, and just kind of finding bodies within these. I just think there's something really interesting about like what we are subconsciously looking for and what we're keeping in our homes. So yeah, it's become a big part of my work is this like collecting of so they're kind of like mementos, like when maybe they remind you of something. I traveled, but I also moved a lot and throughout my 20s, and this is the first time I've stayed in one place, so for more than 3 years. So I do think that there's like these little objects that we, like little keepsakes that we keep with us of like reminding ourselves of something. So then it kind of became these like souvenirs and bodies and yeah.
So we were so lucky that you created a whole new body of work for this show of mementos and fetishes, which we've kind of touched on. What do you think drove you to make this work at this time?
So it's interesting. Me and Christina did have a conversation a little bit before, and I think there were, Florida is a really interesting dichotomy of a place because if we're thinking about it politically, it's, supposedly very conservative. And when I think of conservative, I'm thinking of not this place that's just promising like lush, naked bodies. And there's just so much, like a lot of strip clubs when you just like go down in Tampa, right? I mean, there's just like nudes, right? And there's just like a ton of like, and you're on the beach and there's a lot of nudity and there's a lot of this like promise of party and paradise and tan lines and like escaping from whatever the world is, and you can come here and you can lose your inhibitions and whatever that is. And it's just a strange dichotomy of that, and then it's a place that you can't, you can't say gay, but then it's like, well, like gayest cities are like around here, it's huge. So it's just a very like wide dichotomy of imagery as well, very like I hate the word juxtapose, but like contradictory, right? So I'm trying to remember your question. I'm sorry, I was just going.
Oh no, I mean,
this is the body of the word. Yeah, sorry. So with that being said, feminism right now, I think is still a weird word. I think people are still not really wanting to say that they support feminism because they associate with feminazis. I think that it's gotten a lot worse. That I remember being in classes and like having this discussion about how like we think that we've progressed, but it's actually been very regressive. It's just like silent regression, and maybe not so silent because we're still fighting for abortion rights, right? Like we're still fighting for control of our bodies. So I think it's still important to make work, even if it seems like it's a joke or it's like a tit joke or something like that. And it's not, right? I still think it's important for us to like see a collection of it like on top of one another of like, here's a body, and here's a body, and here's a body, and here's a body, and like, why do you want to collect this? Why do you keep making this? Like, why are there so many breast milks? Like, those are disgusting. Like, why? Like, it's not disgusting, right? But it's like, you don't want to see like a woman breastfeeding, but at the same time, you're gonna drink coffee milk out of this mug. Like, I don't know. It's like this is just a weird dichotomy. So Yeah, I think I wanted to explore as well material. I've always, I've been a painter and I've been, sorry, I don't know if I should like look into the camera or look at the sign. Okay. So, anyway, because I've been a painter, I kind of wanted to explore material a little bit. So I created these wooden cutouts, just to like, I don't know, I just wanted to get out of the box, wanted to get out of the quadrant, I guess. Like I wanted to get out of the wall, and I wanted there to be like more of this like audience experience of moving around and seeing something that's like supposed to be kind of precious, and then having this like, oh, it was like cheap, it was like plywood kind of thing. So and it's like I don't know, my idea was that it was going to be a theater set, right? So it's kind of this like show, right? Yeah, I feel like I said a lot of things.
That's what artists do, right?
Heard myself talking for a long time there. I was like, let's hear Christina. Where is she going?
I would love to get back to the boob mugs and the shark salt and pepper shakers. And, your piece over here, Venus of Florida.
Yes.
How did you come upon those, and how did that take you to that painting?
So Venus of Florida is kind of a joke of the Venus figurine that is very famous, the like chubby woman, right? She's doing that, the like fertility figure. Venus of something.
Willendorf.
Yes. So I kind of wanted to think of like what would be like our Venus, like Florida's Venus. And I just thought of this, like, like it looks like a tattoo almost. It's always like Siesta Key or Tarpon Spring, Miami Beach. The first time I saw it actually in a critical setting was I saw it in New York at the Museum of Sex for Portia Munson's Functional Woman. And basically she's an artist who's a collector, and she's also somebody who like collects a lot of objects that are very literal and like using women's bodies. And so they're very cheeky and kind of funny at first, but then you're like, oh, there's like such an obsession of it that you start to feel really uneasy and like, why do we have this? Like there's, hangers of like legs, and then there's like, other salt and pepper shakers of boobs, and then there's like a naked woman as a can opener, and you're like, oh, look at her, how functional. And it's just like, it's funny, but then it's like gross that you're like, why is my body doing that? Like, why, I don't know, like it feels like you're so like under a microscope, I guess, and then useless an object, I don't know. So I saw a couple of those mugs, and they are a mass-produced mug. And when I was out at Tarpon getting Greek food, I saw them, and they were all on the shelf, and they were all laid out like that. And then underneath them, there were these sharks, and so they're like little salt and pepper sharks. And then my work has always had these tan-lined boobs anyway. Like I've always kind of put that in my work, and they kind of became these like anthropomorphized eyes. So I was like thinking about the viewer looking at something sexual, and then the sexual object was looking at it. And so I just thought that was like a weird like play. Like, are you looking at me? Am I looking at you? And then it doesn't really become that sexual anymore. So I like think about the power exchange that's happening there. So the mugs and the sharks, at first I was like, oh, sharks are like little, like they seem like they're gonna come and eat them. But then I was thinking about the breast milk thing, and I was like, wait, okay, so if I'm thinking about this object, I'm drinking out of it, right? Like it's an empty object I'm supposed to be drinking out of. But then I was thinking about breastfeeding, and like I don't have kids, but I was thinking about like this weird, not like political, but it is something that I would say is like, that's like, it's kind of, seen as kind of grotesque or abject, like spewing milk out of you is, the abject, which is supposed to be like gross, right? So I kind of made these ones have eyes, and I kind of feel like the one on the left is looking down like, oh, and it's just, it's funny, but at the same time, it's also like, why do you, like, who buys this? Except for me, which I'm buying it ironically, of course. But like, if you're seriously, like, I'm buying it as an, you know, as a feminist intellectual, yeah. But those are funny. Somebody's like, oh, did you design that? One thing I was gonna say, the tan line to me is like the important distinction here, and I feel like it's very American, right? Like if you're in other countries, the movies can be free and the beach. Okay, this is not really a thing. But the tan line is that like idea of like the striptease, right? Like the you can't see this. Like you're not supposed to be seeing this, but it's like that exposure of like, you know, and you could go into a lot more of like tanning and all these things. There's a lot to it, but like it's still like that exposure, I guess, that sinuses, that you shouldn't be seeing. Like you're seeing something that you shouldn't be seeing. That's like for you. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, actually, those eye boobs on the left kind of remind me of like Homer Simpson eyes a little bit.
Yeah, they gave me, I don't know, like I had a student who was really into Robert Crumb, and I kept like seeing it, and I was like, oh, because he's like, I don't know if you know who that is, he's a little comic artist in like the 60s, and it's like very like grotesque and gross, and I was like, I don't know, it just happened, but it was like, maybe this, I wouldn't say stupidest, it was maybe one of my stupidest paintings I have made, because I just haven't thought of like, oh man, like it does feel like this, I don't know, like they feel so predatory or something, like these sharks feel really predatory, and so I knew it Wish You Were Here, because I thought of it as like a Florida Wish You Were Here thing, and we won't be there.
So we've had a lot of visitors comment on your artist statement and pareidolia.
Yes.
So just so you're not Googling right now, pareidolia is the tendency to perceive a specific, often meaningful image in a random or ambiguous pattern. So where does this show up in the work, and why are you interested in this phenomenon? So some of it is very on the nose, and then some of it I tried to be a little bit more discreet. It's really the idea that we're seeing, you know, sometimes I was seeing forms like kind of human figures and kudzu, right? So like there's like these big things of trees. Somebody coming? No. Okay. Anyway, these like big things of trees, and it looked like these like big monsters, right? And you're like, oh, it looks like a person, right? And so another example would be seeing Jesus in a piece of toast, right? Like in a specific burn, right? You see it. So I was kind of just thinking about a way that like our subconscious is trying to look for patterns, right? Like maybe it's even our conscious, but like we're trying to look for patterns, right? We're trying to look for like meaning, basically. We're all in chaos. But in this sense, I was thinking of fetish not in like so much of like just sexual, but it's like you can't help but see it or something. So like this is a bowl. And my mom was like, I don't like that bowl look. I was like, well, it's a bowl, Mom. but it's pretty obvious. But it was just like seeing all of these objects. I was like, oh my God, these are so clearly, I mean, I'm not kidding. I saw this face and I was like, those are testicles, you know, and like those are, and I started seeing, when I started looking for it, I really started seeing like so much of the body. And I think like, you see it a lot in nature, right? Like orchis is the title of that, is supposed to be testicles in Greek, literally. That's how they tell. Basically, orchids and testicles are the same word in Greek. But I thought of them as a very feminine object. I was just seeing them as a very feminine object, in my opinion. But I just was starting to look at, you know, a lot of these plants I actually got from the botanical gardens at Sutter Garden and some other places in Florida. But I was seeing like mammogramy, like memory objects, like objects of fluid breast, and seeing like, you know, like we say like, oh, they're fertile, this object, like this flower is female and this is male or whatever. And so it was just interesting to kind of see like these body parts. I mean, this one's like pretty cheeky, right? But like it was cactus, and so it's just kind of
it is like a tongue-in-cheek, but it's also a little bit to, you know, the porcelain, for example, being something that was like very heavily collected more for aristocratic or, you know, more, I don't know what I want to say, like more aristocratic people, I guess you would say that, yeah. European aristocratic. And the irony is that they look so much like women's bodies, and it was actually a very feminine thing to do, is to like collect porcelain. And like you would talk about the porcelain and they would all study it. They would study all the shapes, and it was like considered a very gynocentric space. And so I was just like, this is so interesting that we're like, I think that maybe there's a subconscious of seeing yourself in it too, as a woman, that maybe there's this like mirroring situation happening, and then at the same time, like maybe it's like owning this object yourself, or maybe it's men owning the objects. I don't know what it is, but I just like kind of wanted to play with this subconscious desire, and maybe add like a little bit of like, ooh, why would you have that? But you're like, have you ever looked at this flower? Like it does look like a woman's body, or it does look like a man's, or whatever. But yeah, so prayer really has always been a really big part of my work, actually. Yeah, I think it's important. I think it's what we see in the world and what we try to make sense of. Yeah.
And I will say I worked at a succulent nursery for a while, and those cactuses look just like that. They're hilarious.
I took the spikes out. I just felt like that was overkill. It's better this way.
So I would love for you to talk a little bit about these two framed pieces.
Yeah.
And especially this one, I love the perspective that you're getting with the variety of framing in it. Mm-hmm. How did you sort of come up with that?
Well, I was inspired by, Rene Magritte, which, you know, old painter, right? Everybody, if you want to think of him as the green apple, right? Cheesy painting. He has amazing other paintings. And he really plays with like the reflection, right? And I'm not like gonna go like, oh, it's mirror theory and like understanding who you are in the mirror. But really it was just, it is kind of this taking yourself as an object using the reflection. Right, if you were like, when you're a kid, there's that moment where you realize, like, where you see like an animal, right, and itself in front of the mirror, it hits itself, you know, it hits it, because like, what's that other cat doing here, right? But like, humans, we can like, we touch ourselves, right? We don't touch the mirror thinking that it's somebody else, right? Like, we understand that we're an object. Now we understand we're an object outside of ourselves, right? It's like a whole Lacanian thing, but either way. Grad school. So, get out, grad school. But I did see some other works from Magritte who he's more thinking about another woman and thinking of this like, well, she's hiding, but I see her, right? But I was thinking of more of like this existential of like, I've seen myself and I'm holding like fragility of myself, and I know there just feels like a fragility of it. So I have a mirror like that, and it has like the orchids and a cutout. It's an old mirror from the 80s. And again, I have to have tan lines because one, I'm in Florida, and so I use my own body, so I have tan lines. But I also, again, it's that exposure of like, you're not supposed to see this, but you're seeing it. And I also thought it was funny to have a bikini kind of like coming down. So yeah, it's like a warp. So initially it was going to be a frame that had another mirror, but it was just two mirror. So this frame ended up working for it, but it was another way to just kind of explore, again, like creating the world of the canvas. Like painting is creating your own world within the square or the rectangle or circle, whatever it is. And so then now it's like trying to take it out a little bit of like out of this world, I guess. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Taking it out of the 2D into 3D, becoming more 3D, becoming more incorporated. So like, that's why I have this to like take the paint, still painting, but still like taking it out. Was that a grunt of, oh, or, okay, never mind.
So,
sorry, there's not many of us.
So these are so fun, I think. And I know with this one in particular, Back Fat Baby.
Yes, Back Fat Baby.
There's a lot going on there. That was one of your favorites from my memory. So,
yes.
Tell us a little bit about that one.
So Back Fat Baby, if you saw the back of her, she's got a booty and she's got a little bit of back fat, and there's no shame in that. And I didn't mean to rhyme. And well, I guess initially, you know, the first one I did create was this one, which is Granada, because I was thinking, you know, pomegranates are a religious iconography, right? But it's also supposed to be about like the perfection of God, right? That was like the initial thing. Is very like Islamic and Judaism past. But I did think there was like something very corporal about the pomegranate, and Granada is a city in Spain, and they use it a lot in all of their artwork. And so, like with the Alhambra, so I was thinking that. So then I was creating another vase, and I was just I don't know how to like explain it, but I was like, oh, what if it like a vase is a vessel is a body. Our bodies are vessels that get us from point A to B. Like, what if it was a belly? And I wasn't thinking of pregnancy or anything. Some people are like, oh, it's pregnant because it has stretch marks. So I wasn't really thinking of that. I was more thinking of like the stress on the body. You can have stretch marks without being pregnant. And sometimes like stress, especially is in that area of like the cortisol, right? So it creates these like lines that kind of like come up. And so I was thinking of like ceramics and this like expanding. And one time I tried to do ceramics a long time ago, and like my stuff would just like crack and break, right?
You didn't have the right teacher.
I didn't. I'm terrible ceramicist. But which is why I'm doing paintings about ceramics. But like I was thinking of like almost it's like a cracking, but at the same time it really like if you see like stretch marks, you see these like lines that are like it's your skin kind of like grasp, right? Like it's just like expanding, holding onto itself, but it like and then it repairs and it becomes this like white line, right? Tiger stripes, or whatever you want to call it. It's awful, right? But nonetheless, it still is this like endurance of something, right? Like people go, oh, it's my tiger stripes because I endured, you know, whatever it was. And so this is like showing it. But like our bodies change, they really do. And so like the more like as I'm getting older, the more I'm seeing like my body reacting to trauma and like reacting to stress and reacting to these like different situations, and I don't have any damn control of it. So I wish I did. But yeah, and like I also thought, you know, with the backside, it's just hilarious, but because of just like it's just silly to think of like the butt of a vase, right? The vases we have, they have feet, right? They say they have feet. Thank God I didn't put feet on it, but thought about it. But yeah, I just thought of like this empty, hollow thing, and it's just, maybe it was a little bit on the nose, but I just was like, I don't know, I feel like it puts it in conversation of like, you're supposed to be looking at bodies. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so you talked about Portia Munson being one of your inspirations.
Yeah.
Who else were you looking at when you were thinking about this show?
So obviously I had a really great time in New York because I saw Alex Katz's his retrospective at the Guggenheim. And so he had these cutouts, and he, you know, it's always a figure, everything's a figure. And so he had all these cutouts, and I noticed that some of them would like be in the canvas, and then they would like jut out of the canvas, and then there would be like some other pieces, and they were all kind of like cut out and cropped. And it felt like it was like just like those like simple moments. And so I was like, oh, I want something. It's like, it felt so theatrical. Like it felt like you wanted to move around it. And when you were able to move around it, you could see the back of it. And then it felt like the painting was like in the world. I don't know how to explain it. Like, again, it's taking what we think is like, this is the imaginary world within the rectangle, and then bringing it back out, which is why sculpture is really hard. Anybody who does 3-dimensional work is amazing. So it's taking it out of that place, and so I really wanted to kind of do like a trompe-l'oeil, which is French for looks. What is it? Like full of the eye. So it's taking something that would be the same size. So like, I feel like in these, when there's a photograph of it, we're putting it in the 2-dimensional space. So it's already flattening everything. So it looks like that. And then when you come in person, you're like, oh, it's just a board. You're like, and you can move around it, but it's just like a flat, cheap, well, not that cheap, but like cheap wood kind of thing. Like it's a soft wood, right? So, yeah, I think those were like really main. Magritte, Rousseau's always my somebody that I go back to. Henry Rousseau was a French painter. I don't remember when exactly, but in the 18th, 19th century, maybe?
19th century.
Yeah. He was just a French guy, and he was not a professional artist, but he would go to botanical gardens and he would make up these jungle scenes. And some of them are very, they wouldn't go well today, is all I'm gonna say. But some of them are really beautiful, and some of like the patterning, and there's a flatness to them that is just really interesting. So I would say him, and yeah, I don't know, I'm going to like surrealist for whatever reason. Magritte is like my dude, but Alex Katz too.
Yeah, do you go to the Dali Museum a lot or ever?
So I don't know if it's that surrealism of like Dali. I respect Dali, I do like Dali a lot. I just think like, I'm trying to think of the others. I think it's just Magritte is honestly like the only surrealist. I do feel like surrealism has come into the contemporary a little bit right now. Like I do see a little bit more surrealism right now, but not in like the same way as like Dali. Yeah. No shame to him.
No, not at all.
Yeah, he's awesome. Obviously.
We sort of touched on this a little bit, but in your artist statement, you really talk about how the female body has this fragility, but it also has this ability to endure trauma. And I think this contrast is definitely reflected in the work, but why is that so important for you to share with the viewer?
For a lot of reasons. I think being a woman comes with a lot of rage. I know it's not what we talked about, but I do think that there's a lot of questions of like, what do you own? And like, what is yours? And like, what are you getting ready for? Like, who are you getting ready for? What are you like? And I say getting ready, like how are you presenting yourself? Who are you presenting yourself for? And in terms of like trauma, like I kind of like went back into and what the work used to be more about. My thesis work was more of like experiencing a situation where you really did not have ownership of your body. In terms of it could have been from a bad relationship, or it could be even like medical trauma or whatever that is. It's the lack of ownership of that, and then trying to understand what is the purpose of your existence, right? Like sometimes like as women, like when we get older, as we start to like become less like sexual objects, it's okay, bless you. As we become less of like sexual objects, like we start to become invisible, right? Like then you think of Karens or whatever that is, right? Well, there's some kind of misogyny, I think, undertones in Karens, whatever that may mean. But like, you're not a sexual object. You're not something that's like people are gawking at or whatever. So there's like also maybe there's a power in that too. Like maybe there's something like now you're invisible, but like maybe you have like more power in that. Like you can see like older women who just don't give a damn and they're like demand what they need or whatever. So to go back to it, having the ownership of your body, I do think it's important to still be making work about bodies that are objects and putting them in weird situations, and maybe it's becoming like obsessive at this point. But I just think that we're constantly having to fight for it, and that might come in a lot of ways. So
yeah, I mean, it's so wonderful because you have so much fun with your work, but there's, you know, a lot going on and a lot of content behind it.
mm-hmm.
What is your overall message to the viewer? What do you want us to walk away with thinking in our hearts about this show?
Mm-hmm. So of course, like, I can't put any feelings in you, but
well,
I can try. But I think it's just more of noticing or awareness. Like I said, when I saw the Portia Munson, it was in the Museum of Sex, so it's already kind of a funny place. And it's this scene, like, maybe there is kind of a more sinister side of like what we are collecting or what we're seeing or the images that we're constantly seeing. And when you see it in this, like, once it's kind of in the space to be more like sat with or more like criticized, is when we start to see like, oh, why do we have so many fashion magazine pages of women laying on the ground like they've been beat or they're unconscious? Like, why do we have, why? You ever think about that? Why is that? But you don't think about it because you're like, Michael Kors, okay. You know, like, but why is there so many of this like submission, right? And like, why is there so much violence? A lot of the work too, which people like to realize is like, I do put like funny stuff, but like, it's actually a lot of violent undertones in it of like cut bodies, right? Like being like, that's all you are. So, and I have a lot of chopped penises too, but that's different. But like, those are funny. But like, I don't hate men, by the way, but it's funny right there. But like, it's just, yeah, it's because it's funny, right? Like, you're like, that's funny. Like, that's silly, because you see that. And you see a chopped sausage, you're like, oh, you know. But like, also, like, I thought of like a woman's hand, like holding a butcher knife. Like, that's like a powerful kind of image of like taking something domestic and like using it in, you know, an empowering way or whatever that is. So it's just kind of like noticing like why you tie femininity to domesticity, and maybe just like asking why. I don't know. Or like just noticing. Just like, I think just awareness sometimes is enough.
I mean, it couldn't be more important in Florida in 2024, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just wiped under the rug sometimes. Yeah.
Well, do you have any exciting plans for your next body of work? Any interest in continuing these vessels?
I do. I'm still, I'm going to be playing with, I took a little break actually, but I do have a plan for works to start using this like cutout and kind of, I'm looking more of like bodies, like literal bodies and this like functionality, and like lamps and cups again. So I think I'm going to still go into like more still life, but I'm going to have more of like something kind of like coming out. So we'll see what happens. And then we'll see where we go from there. I was gonna say I had an interview for something, but but we'll see. I'm not an official anyway. So we'll see. Hopefully there will be work out there in the summer is all I will say.
I can't wait.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Aimee. The show is beautiful, and we'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you all.
It's fabulous that you're in Florida at this time in your life, because of Florida being like the apex of just conflict how we deal with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at this type of work, I mean, these pieces, these collectibles, when you think about where they're really popular, and then you think about the political situation within those areas. And it's always been a really interesting dichotomy for me in America about how much, as a government entity, we want to try and control what people do sexually, not just women, but men too.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, we'll burn books, but we'll sell those.
It's like right next to the kids' stuff.
Yeah, you know, so it's like, okay, what are we really trying to accomplish here? So we haven't progressed since Puritanism. We're still confused about our own sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And then I look at this and I go, okay, I was in Iceland and I went to a museum of the Phaleological Museum. And
Yes.
I was in a whole building that was nothing but penises.
Yeah.
And it was fantastic. You know, I was like, could I ever see this in the U.S.? It's like, no, we're afraid of those too.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you an interesting story, and that is I'm from Delaware, and Andrew Wyeth, of course, amazing painter.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the Brandywine River Museum to actually see his nude paintings of Christina's brother.
Oh my
No, not her brother. His famous painting, Christina. And they were up on the walls for about 2 weeks, and they had to be taken down because people complained because they were male nudes. So, you know, I mean, and they're beautiful paintings, but we're afraid of those too. But anyway, I love your work, I love the story behind it, and I would like to see these pieces. I love interaction. I really would like to have people be able to pick up my ceramic work and touch it and shake it and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when I saw these in front of the paintings, I thought it was very intriguing, and that wouldn't it be fun to have tracks in front of the paintings so that you could move the vessels in them and discover things behind them.
Oh,
So,
I like that idea.
Just a thought that they're really fun.
I like that idea.
I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that story too. It's pretty amazing what can be shown and what can't be shown. And Florida, I mean, I think they just banned like an encyclopedia at a school, right?
As you said, it's kind of funny in a way. It's just
Why? There's sexual
absurd.
undertones, and you're like, I just saw this Space Odyssey place in Monvino or whatever, like all those strip clubs on like the main street of Dale Mary in Tampa. I mean, they're like right there.
But that's tax revenue.
Right? It's like, it's for tourists, and Florida is like very like, it's a welcoming tourist place, and like, whereas it's like, they're trying to be kind of like a state of sin and like losing your inhibitions, come here, like just throw caution to the wind, and so it's a really interesting place. I agree. I think when I graduated from USF, all my colleagues, with the exception of I think one, stayed. Everybody left, and so I really just felt like there was something here, like there was something to still research. So it's been an interesting place. Yeah, the work gets weirder. It's been kitschier since I've been here. I made a manifesto against kitsch when I got in grad school. I had to make a manifesto against it. And now it's here. So, I don't know. It just wears on you all of a sudden. You like it. Yeah.
Just read Coral Hyacinth.
Yeah. It has a place. It has a place now. Yeah, I get it now. I think I first got here, I was like, I hate this. Yeah. Been here too long. Just kidding. Anybody else?
Any other questions?
Yeah. Ask away.
Mine's more like a comment, sort of.
Yeah.
Okay, so I love the belly, and I've been thinking about like why I like the belly so much.
Sure.
And I think it's because usually when you see these like objectifying souvenirs, it's like boobs, like perfect boobs, or like the t-shirts with like the perfect figure cut into them. And then when you see anything that is like less than ideal, like it's typically from a male perspective. Like, you know those fanny packs that look like bellies, like big hairy bellies, and they're like, oh, it's funny. So I love the belly because it's like, this is what a real belly looks like, and it's not like perfect. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I can't say how many times people have said, is that a pregnant belly? And I was like, no.
It's just a belly.
And they're like, but there's stretch marks. And I'm like, yeah.
Show me yours.
Yeah, I mean, you can have them, and like it's. Thank you for commenting on that, because that is something that like I try to talk to my students even about, because I'm an educator, an art educator, and I try to be like, what if the body wasn't this like perfect porn body? Like what if? I don't know. It's just like. It's just interesting. So that's why I say like back fat, because it has, you know, I was like, I mean, she has to have some rolls. She has to. There's just like no way. And so like, because I just feel like any skinny people have stretch marks, you know, or cellulite or whatever. But yeah, I just wanted it to be like something that like we can kind of, you can see even yourself, or you can just see like that is more like a realistic body, I guess. Yeah, but thank you for mentioning that. It's too bad because like art history had a lot more like, well, I wouldn't say they're realistic bodies, but they were very like voluptuous bodies. Yeah, sometimes the boobs though were so round. It's just, I thought of them so separate from the body too. I was like, I think they just were like, this is probably what it looks like. You know? Right. Like maybe it looks like that. Yeah, that's probably what it looks like.
Well, it was so funny. The first people that really got to preview this exhibition were 13-year-old boys.
It was a bar mitzvah. Yeah, mazel tov.
Oh my god.
If you don't know what a bar mitzvah is, it's the day that they become a man. So
It's
perfect.
it's fitting. You're a man. Now enjoy this feminist work. Like, yeah, I wish I could have been there so badly. I would have loved to be a fly on the wall and just like hear the comments.
Apparently they didn't notice at first. They were sort of taking the party, and then later in the evening they were like running up here every 2 minutes.
It's so funny. Well, you can see it at a souvenir shop, right? It's not true. Yeah, right? I'm not saying they're not saying anything I haven't seen before. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? What do you guys think?
I love it.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I remember seeing it like before even the show was.
Oh, great.
I mean, I lived there, so
Yeah.
I saw some things. Yeah, it was the first time I saw it.
Cool.
It's very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I put you on the spot.
It's okay.
I just felt like I wasn't looking, because my body is like facing this side of the audience, and so I feel like I'm like, I'm sorry, I didn't say anything.
Well, thank you so much, Aimee. It was
Thank
such
you,
a
guys.
delight to have you and have your work, and I can't wait to see what's next.
Thank you so very much. Thank you guys for coming and taking the time. Yeah, thanks for having me, Christina. I really appreciate it. Thanks for believing in me.
Oh, it was easy.
It was like a couple months ago, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I was like, just believe it, it'll get done, it'll get done. You're like, I believe you, it will. So I really appreciate Christina's hard work and curation on it, and it gave me a lot of inspiration too. So I really appreciate all the work that went into it. I have to thank you. So we appreciate it. Yeah.
All right, well, we've got more time to mingle if anyone's interested in more mingling.